I want you to picture something for a second. A really specific, but probably a very familiar scenario.
Oh, I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, you probably do. So you're walking down a major commercial street in your city, and it's the middle of July.
Right.
It's like 2:00 p.m. The sun is just at its absolute peak, and you are in the grips of one of those brutal, stagnant summer heat waves.
Absolute worst.
Yeah, you know exactly the kind of day I'm talking about, right? The kind where you push open the heavy glass doors of your office building or maybe like a heavily air-conditioned coffee shop.
And it just hits you.
Yes. The outside air just hits you like a physical wall. I mean, it feels heavy. You try to take a breath, and it's like, it feels like you're inhaling warm soup.
That is accurate.
And you can literally look down the avenue and see the heat radiating off the asphalt. You know, those distinct, shimmering, watery waves.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, every single step you take in that heat, it feels like this enormous expenditure of energy.
It really does.
Because the sun isn't just shining, it feels like it actually has weight to it, like it's physically pressing down on your shoulders.
Exactly. I mean, the sweat starts forming on your lower back before you've even made it to the crosswalk. So I guess my question for you, the listener, is what is your strategy in that moment?
That's a great question.
Right, because when you're out there in the thick of it, just trying to get 5 blocks to your subway stop, or maybe just to pick up lunch, how do you handle it?
Right.
Do you do that frantic, kind of undignified dash from one tiny sliver of awning to the next?
Or hug the sides of buildings?
Yeah, hoping for like a foot of shade. Or do you just grit your teeth, pull your baseball cap down, stare at the pavement, and just suffer through the sweat?
Well, I mean, I think most of us inevitably end up doing the latter. We just accept it.
Yeah, we do.
We basically treat the oppressive urban heat as this sort of unavoidable environmental tax on our daily commute.
An environmental tax, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
We just tell ourselves, well, it's just weather and we just have to endure it.
But what if you didn't have to? I mean, what if there was a way to basically carry that air-conditioned coffee shop environment with you?
Or at least the shade of a massive oak tree.
Right, exactly. Carry with you as you walk. Because that is exactly what we are exploring in our deep dive today.
And it is such a fascinating topic.
It really is. So I was reading this incredibly fascinating essay on Podcaster Capital.
Okay.
And it's titled Walking the City in the Sunshade.
Yes.
And honestly, it completely blew my mind.
Yes.
Because it takes this incredibly simple, historically ancient tool.
The men's handheld sun umbrella.
Yes, the sun umbrella. And it explains how it is quietly, but very rapidly, reemerging as the absolute ultimate piece of modern urban survival gear.
It's really a profound shift in how we think about interacting with our environment.
It totally is.
Because usually when we start talking about climate adaptation, especially in an urban context, the conversation immediately zooms out.
Right, it goes to the macro level.
Yeah, exactly. These massive macro level infrastructure projects. We start talking about how the city council needs to plant 2 million canopy trees.
Or architects redesigning downtown blocks for wind flow.
Right, or how we need to rip up all the black asphalt and replace it with reflective pavement.
And look, I mean, those are great ideas.
Absolutely.
But they take 30 years. I'm sweating right now. I need a solution for my walk to the grocery store this afternoon.
Yeah.
Not in the year 2056.
Exactly. And that is the brilliance of the argument being made in this source. The most immediate, the most effective, and really the most reliable solutions are often entirely personal.
They're portable.
Yes. They are things you can control without waiting for some bureaucratic committee to approve a municipal budget.
I have to admit, though, I was pretty skeptical at first.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, before I dug into this material, if you had asked me about umbrellas, I would have told you they are exclusively a rainy day inconvenience.
Just for the rain.
Yeah, they're those flimsy, frustrating things you buy for $5 at a pharmacy when you get caught in a downpour.
And they blow inside out at the first gust of wind.
Exactly. They poke other pedestrians in the eye, and then you leave them dripping in a puddle in the hallway of some restaurant and completely forget them.
Right.
So the idea of carrying one on a perfectly bright, sunny day, it just seemed completely absurd to me.
Well, and that is the standard modern perception, but it fundamentally misunderstands what an umbrella can actually be.
Right.
To truly appreciate why this tool is experiencing such a massive revival, we kind of have to stop thinking about the rain for a moment.
Okay.
We have to completely reevaluate the battleground we are stepping onto when we leave our homes. We need to understand what we are actually fighting against in a modern city during the summer.
And the picture the author paints of that battleground is intense. I mean, it really shifted my perspective Because I normally just think of a city street as a static place, you know?
Hmm.
It's just geometry. Buildings, sidewalks, roads. It's just the empty space you walk through to get from point A to point B.
Right, just infrastructure.
Yeah. But this analysis frames the modern city as a volatile, highly active thermal system.
It really does. From a thermodynamic perspective, a city is not a passive backdrop at all. It is an aggressively hostile environment.
Right.
And it all comes down to the materials we chose when we built these metropolises over the last 150 years.
Right.
We chose materials based on two main criteria: durability and cost effectiveness.
Makes sense.
We wanted things that wouldn't collapse and were cheap to mass produce. What we did not do was choose materials based on human thermal comfort.
Let's really dig into the physics of that, because the essay breaks down the specific behaviors of these everyday materials, and honestly, it's terrifying when you realize what's happening around you.
It really is.
Let's start with the most obvious one. Concrete. Every sidewalk, every plaza, every building foundation. The author points out that concrete doesn't just sit there, it acts as a massive thermal battery.
That is the perfect way to visualize it, a thermal battery, because concrete has a very high thermal mass.
Right.
So when the sun beats down on a concrete sidewalk, the concrete does not reflect that solar energy away.
It drinks it in.
It absolutely drinks it in. It absorbs the shortwave radiation from the sun all day long, and it stores it deep within its structure. It is literally charging up with heat.
And then even when the sun goes behind a cloud, or more noticeably when the sun goes down, that battery starts discharging.
Precisely. It begins emitting long-wave infrared radiation back into the environment.
Wow.
This is why you can walk out of a restaurant at, say, 10:30 p.m., long after the sun has set, and the air still feels suffocating.
Because the ground is still hot.
Yes. The physical environment is literally radiating the afternoon's trapped heat directly into your body. You are walking over a giant, slowly cooling oven element.
Okay, so you have the ground cooking you from below. Then you look up. And what is every modern skyscraper made of?
Glass.
Glass. We have these towering monuments of glass everywhere. And the text notes that glass amplifies localized heat pockets.
Think about the geometry of a modern downtown. We have effectively built our cities out of giant mirrors and magnifying lenses.
Oh, that sounds awful.
The sun's rays don't just hit the street directly. They hit the sheer glass facade of a 40-story office building, and then that glass reflects that concentrated solar energy directly downward onto the pedestrian level.
To us.
Exactly. There have even been famous architectural blunders, like the Walkie-Talkie building in London a few years ago.
I remember reading about that.
Right, where the concave shape of the glass actually concentrated the sun's rays so intensely that it melted the plastic components of cars parked on the street below.
That is wild. People were literally frying eggs on the sidewalk.
Yes.
But even without that extreme concave shape, just a standard flat wall of glass is constantly bouncing secondary radiation at you.
Constantly.
And it's not just the buildings. Think about all the metal. Cars lined up bumper to bumper in traffic, transit shelters, delivery trucks, street signs.
It's everywhere.
The text highlights how metal surfaces reflect and intensify the angles of sunlight.
So when you are walking down a typical urban street, you are not just receiving solar radiation from above.
Which would be bad enough.
Right, that would be bad enough. But you are receiving it from 360 degrees. It is bouncing off the hood of a parked car and hitting your torso. It is bouncing off the glass tower and hitting your shoulders. It is radiating up from the concrete and hitting your legs. You are inside a remarkably efficient, multi-directional thermal trap.
And just to make it utterly inescapable, the physical layout of the city traps all this chaotic energy.
Yes, the grid.
You have these narrow streets lined with tall buildings, and they create what the author refers to as windless heat corridors. Because the buildings block any natural prevailing breezes, so the hot air just sits there, stagnating.
It's completely trapped.
Reading this, it honestly made me think of playing a video game.
Really? How so?
Well, you know those action or survival games where the environment itself is trying to kill you?
Like a lava level?
Yeah, like a level where the floor is lava or you're walking through a toxic swamp and your character has this stamina bar or health meter that is constantly draining just by standing there.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And the only way you survive is by frantically sprinting from one tiny shrinking safe zone to the next, just to let your health recharge.
That is a brilliant analogy. The fragmented shadows on the street are your safe zones.
Yes. Think about how you walk in the summer. You subconsciously map out this desperate route. You sprint from the shadow cast by a single struggling street tree. You pause in it for a second.
Just to catch your breath.
Right. Then you dash across the glaring intersection to get into the shadow of a parked delivery truck, and then you hug the wall of a building just to stay in that 2-foot sliver of shade.
It's survival.
You were playing a real-life video game where the boss is the sun, and you were just desperately trying not to take environmental heat damage to your health bar.
It is exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is.
And if we pull back and look at the broader implications of what you're describing, walking in the city is no longer just a simple matter of human locomotion.
No, not at all.
It is a constant, subconscious, physically exhausting negotiation with these fluctuating microclimates. You are navigating a gauntlet of extreme heat gradients.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of this deep dive.
Right.
If the city itself, the concrete below, the glass above, the metal all around, and the stagnant air is actively working against our basic biological ability to regulate our temperature, how do we fight back?
How do we adapt?
Because, as we established, I can't wait for urban planners to dig up the roads and plant a magical forest.
And this is where we introduce the core thesis of the material we are examining today, the concept of micro-infrastructure.
Micro-infrastructure. I just love the weight of that term.
It does elevate the conversation, doesn't it?
It really does. The text makes a very specific point. To frame the sun umbrella, not as some frivolous fashion accessory, not as a prop, but as genuine micro-infrastructure.
It is a personal, deployable thermal regulation system.
And it requires a complete paradigm shift in how Westerners view the object.
Absolutely. Because historically, and certainly in our lifetimes, the umbrella has been defined by reactivity.
Right. You react to the weather.
You listen to the weather forecast.
Yes.
The forecaster tells you there's a 60% chance of rain, so you carry the umbrella as a contingency against the weather failing you.
Just in case.
When the rain starts, you react to the negative stimulus by opening it. It is purely defensive.
But the sun umbrella operates on a proactive logic.
Exactly.
You aren't reacting to a sudden unpredictable storm. I mean, the sun is entirely predictable.
We know it's going to be there.
You are stepping out into an environment you know is hostile, and you are deploying a tool to intentionally manufacture a localized artificial microclimate for your own body.
You are actively altering the physics of your immediate surroundings.
And the empirical data backing up the efficacy of this tool is staggering. I mean, the author cites studies showing that under strong, direct sunlight, deploying a high-quality sun umbrella can reduce a person's perceived temperature by up to 10 degrees Celsius.
That number is huge.
I really want you, the listener, to pause and internalize that number. 10 degrees Celsius.
It's massive.
We are not talking about a subtle placebo effect breeze here. 10 degrees is the difference between a slightly uncomfortable but manageable summer afternoon and a dangerous heat stroke-inducing thermal crisis.
It is the difference between your body being able to cool itself through normal perspiration and your cardiovascular system becoming completely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
The essay actually brings in a very vivid, grounded example to illustrate this. It looks at the city of Zagreb during their peak summer heat waves.
Yes, the Zagreb data was terrifying. The text points out that in those extreme conditions, the pavement temperatures in the city center can easily exceed the ambient air temperature by 10 to 20 degrees Celsius.
And let's break down why that happens, going back to our concrete thermal battery.
Okay, yeah.
The ambient air temperature, which is what you see on your weather app, say 35 degrees Celsius.
Which is already really high.
Right. But that is measured in the shade about 2 meters off the ground.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. But the pavement is absorbing direct solar radiation all day. So while the air is 35 degrees, the physical asphalt or concrete you are standing on can easily reach 50 or even 55 degrees Celsius.
So if you are out walking the dog or walking to work, the ambient air is already hot, but the ground is literally cooking you.
It is.
The heat is radiating up your legs, bouncing off the surrounding buildings, and the sun is beating down on the crown of your head.
In that specific localized environment, stepping out without robust protection is an act of bodily endangerment.
It really is.
When you are caught between a 55-degree sidewalk and a glaring sun, an umbrella is no longer a quaint accessory. It is a piece of portable life support.
Portable life support.
It is the only thing standing between you and severe thermal stress.
Okay, so I hear the data, I understand the thermodynamics, but I have to play devil's advocate here because I know exactly what you, the listener, might be thinking right now.
Go for it.
You are picturing yourself walking down your local main street on a Tuesday, completely blue sky, not a rain cloud in sight, and you pull out an umbrella.
And people stare.
Right. Wouldn't that feel incredibly theatrical? Honestly, it feels like a massive hassle.
It does feel that way to a lot of people.
Because who wants to lug around a bulky, heavy metal pole all day to stay a little cooler? It just seems disproportionate to the problem.
Well, that reaction is incredibly common, but it is entirely rooted in a legacy mindset.
Legacy mindset.
Yes. When you imagine carrying an umbrella, your brain immediately summons the image of, like, a 1990s golf umbrella.
Oh, yeah, those huge ones.
Or one of those cheap, heavy, spring-loaded rain umbrellas that are clumsy to hold and a complete nuisance to carry when closed. You are assuming the tool hasn't evolved.
Which is the biggest misconception the essay shatters. The engineering behind these tools has undergone this silent revolution.
It really has.
The modern urban sun umbrella is not a repurposed rain shield. It is a highly specialized piece of technical climate gear. The author explicitly calls it a compact piece of environmental engineering.
And that's exactly what it is.
I want to spend some time breaking down the actual material science here, because when you understand the tech, you realize why this qualifies as serious microinfrastructure.
Let's do it. It really is a marvel of applied material science. Let's start with the foundational element, the canopy fabric itself, and specifically its UV protection capabilities.
Right, because this isn't just a piece of dyed nylon stretched over some wire.
Not at all.
The text emphasizes that genuine sun umbrellas carry a UPF 50+ rating. Now, we're all familiar with SPF for sunscreen, but UPF ultraviolet protection factor is for fabrics, and the math the author provides is crucial.
A UPF rating of 50+ means that only 1/50th of the ultraviolet radiation hitting the outside of the fabric is able to penetrate through to the other side.
1/50th. So if 50 units of UV radiation hit the top, only one gets through.
Exactly.
That translates to an absolute blockage of approximately 98% of all UV rays. It is basically a portable lead wall, but for ultraviolet light.
That's a great image.
Think of it like a microscopic sieve where the holes are so incredibly tiny that the damaging radiation simply cannot fit through.
It guarantees a safe zone from cellular DNA damage, but as we discussed earlier, blocking the UV rays is only half the equation.
Right, because of the heat.
Yes.
Okay.
UV causes sunburns and skin cancer, but it is the infrared radiation that causes the immediate sensation of heat. If you just block the UV but absorb the heat, you are still going to be miserable.
Which explains why you can't just take your standard black rain umbrella out on a sunny day.
Have you tried that?
I actually have tried that. It blocks the sun, so you're technically in the shade, but underneath the canopy, it feels like you're standing under a heat lamp.
Exactly. Because a standard black nylon rain umbrella absorbs the solar radiation. The fabric itself heats up incredibly fast.
It gets so hot.
It becomes a secondary radiant heat source just inches from your head, baking you from above. To solve this, modern sun umbrellas utilize advanced reflective coatings.
And the materials they are using are straight out of a science fiction novel. The text lists titanium dioxide, silver nanoparticles, and these complex aluminized fabric laminates.
This is where it gets truly fascinating. We have taken advanced aerospace level materials.
Aerospace materials.
The kind of reflective coatings you might find on a satellite or the exterior of a high altitude aircraft to protect delicate instruments from solar radiation, and we have applied them to one of the most ancient human inventions.
It's incredible, because these coatings don't absorb the light. They actively reject it.
Yes. They do.
The nanoparticles act like millions of microscopic mirrors seamlessly integrated into the fabric, bouncing the infrared and UV photons away before they can even interact with the material.
And by reflecting that energy outward, the canopy remains cool to the touch, and the space beneath it remains a true thermally protected void.
But the author points out a potential flaw with just using a giant mirror.
Right, the glare.
If the outside is highly reflective, what about the inside? They detail this brilliant, highly intentional dual-layer system.
The dual-layer system is key.
You have the outer aluminized or titanium layer doing the heavy lifting of rejecting the sun. But the inner layer, the part you actually look up at, is dark, often black or navy blue. Why is that?
It comes back to our discussion about the urban environment. Remember the concrete sidewalks and the glass buildings bouncing light everywhere?
Oh, the 360-degree trap.
Yes. That is called the albedo effect, the measure of how much light a surface reflects. Urban pavement has a relatively high albedo. It throws a lot of harsh, glaring light back up.
So if the inside of your umbrella was also silver or bright white, All that harsh light bouncing off the sidewalk would hit the underside of your canopy and reflect directly down into your eyes.
You'd be blinding yourself.
You would. You'd be squinting the whole time.
Precisely. It would cause massive visual fatigue and eye strain. By making the inner layer dark and matte, it absorbs that ground bounce glare.
It eats the light.
It doesn't reflect it into your eyes. It creates a pocket of shade that is not only thermally cooler, but visually soothing. It is a complete sensory relief from the harshness of the urban landscape.
Okay, so the canopy is an engineering marvel. But what about the structure? We talked about those windless heat corridors suddenly turning into violent wind tunnels when you turn a corner.
Ah, the wind. The umbrella's natural enemy.
It really is. That is my biggest nightmare with umbrellas. The sudden gust that turns it into a jagged, inside-out bird cage, and you're wrestling with it on a crowded street corner looking like a fool.
Well, the engineers solved that too.
They did.
Yes. The text notes a complete industry shift away from traditional rigid metal ribs. Metal has a fatal flaw in an urban wind environment. When it is stressed past its limit, it permanently deforms or snaps.
Right, once it bends, it's done.
Once an old umbrella inverts and a metal rib bends, it is garbage.
So what are they using instead? The text mentions flexible fiberglass and ultra-lightweight carbon fiber structural composites.
These materials possess high tensile strength, but incredible flexibility. City wind is chaotic, you know?
Right.
It doesn't blow in a steady breeze. It is channeled between skyscrapers, creating sudden turbulent downdrafts and violent gusts through the Venturi effect.
Venturi effect, right.
Carbon fiber ribs are designed to bow and flex with that chaotic pressure. Even if the umbrella is forced to invert by a massive gust, the flexible ribs allow you to simply pull it back into shape without structural failure.
So it just pops right back.
They survive the aerodynamic violence of the city.
And crucially, these aerospace materials solve the hassle argument we talked about earlier.
The weight issue.
Yeah. The essay points out that manufacturers have imposed strict weight limits on these daily carry designs. A premium urban sun umbrella is engineered to weigh under 300 grams.
To put that in perspective, 300 grams is roughly the weight of your smartphone with a heavy-duty case on it.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe 2 medium-sized apples. It is practically negligible.
And they feature these ultra-compact, 3-fold, sometimes 5-fold mechanisms. When collapsed, they are about the size of a water bottle.
Very easy to carry.
They just vanish into a backpack, a tote bag, or a messenger bag. You aren't walking around with a cane. You're carrying a dormant piece of high-tech infrastructure that weighs less than your lunch, ready to be deployed the second the environment becomes hostile.
It perfectly aligns with modern urban mobility. It is frictionless carrying.
All right, I'm sold on the tech, but let's look at the alternatives.
Okay.
Because the skeptic is going to look at this and say, sure, a carbon fiber titanium umbrella is cool, but I already have an entire bathroom cabinet dedicated to sun protection.
Right. People think they have it covered.
Exactly. I have SPF 50. I have a drawer full of baseball caps. I bought one of those fancy long-sleeve UPF hiking shirts. The text anticipates this and does what I consider the ultimate showdown, comparing the high-tech umbrella to the rest of the established sun protection ecosystem.
It is a critical comparison to make because we need to understand the physiological limitations of those other tools. People naturally assume that if they slather on sunscreen and put on a hat, they have solved the problem.
Let's dismantle that, starting with sunscreen. The essay is very fair. It acknowledges that broad-spectrum sunscreen is highly effective against UV radiation. You must wear it to prevent skin cancer.
Absolutely.
But it labels sunscreen as entirely reactive, and this is the massive blind spot we all have. It absorbs into your skin, it protects yourself from DNA mutation, but it does absolutely zero to reduce your physical heat load.
In fact, chemical sunscreens work by absorbing the UV light and converting it into minute amounts of heat, which is then released from the skin.
Wait, really? It makes heat?
Yes. So not only does it not cool you down, the very mechanism of chemical protection generates a tiny thermal byproduct, but more importantly, sunscreen is completely transparent to infrared radiation.
Meaning the actual heat of the sun just passes right through the lotion and bakes your tissue.
Exactly.
So you won't get a sunburn, but your core body temperature is still rising. You are still sweating profusely. You can absolutely suffer from severe heat exhaustion, dizziness, and heat stroke while wearing a pristine layer of SPF 50.
You are cooking, you just aren't burning.
That's a great way to put it. You're cooking, not burning. Okay, what about hats? A good baseball cap or a bucket hat? The text says they're good for shielding the face and the scalp from direct rays.
They are.
But during a prolonged walk, They leave your shoulders, your neck, your arms, and your torso completely exposed.
A hat provides incredibly localized shade. Unless you're willing to walk down a crowded New York or London sidewalk wearing a massive, yard-wide sombrero,
Which would be hilarious.
which has obvious practical and spatial limitations, your upper body is absorbing massive amounts of solar radiation. Furthermore, many tight-fitting hats trap the heat radiating from your scalp, acting like an insulating lid.
An insulating lid. That makes perfect sense. Okay, then what about the apparel route? We see a lot of these UV blocking clothing lines now, long sleeve UPF 50 shirts.
Yes, very popular.
The source notes, they are highly effective at blocking the rays, but they are generally terrible for urban heat. Why is that?
It comes down to the competing needs of UV blockage and breathability. To achieve a high UPF rating, a fabric must be woven incredibly tightly so that light cannot pass through the gaps in the threads.
Okay.
Often they are made of synthetic materials like polyester or nylon blends.
So they act like a physical barrier to the sun.
Yes, but they also act as a physical barrier to your own body. In a stagnant, humid 35-degree urban corridor where there is no breeze to facilitate convective cooling, wrapping your body in a tightly woven synthetic fabric traps your metabolic heat.
Because your body is generating heat by walking.
Exactly. Your body is generating heat through the physical exertion of walking. You sweat to cool down, but the tightly woven shirt limits evaporation. You are effectively insulating yourself.
It is good for some things, but not the city.
It is perfect for a breezy day on a sailboat, but disastrous in a stagnant concrete canyon.
You're essentially wearing a micro greenhouse.
Yes.
And finally, what about those little portable electric fans? You see tourists carrying them all the time.
Oh, the handheld fan.
The author points out they provide a stream of cooling air, but they offer zero protection from the radiation.
A fan relies purely on convective and evaporative cooling. It pushes air across your skin to help evaporate your sweat.
Right.
But if the ambient air is 35 degrees, the fan is just blowing 35-degree air into your face like a hairdryer on a low setting.
A hairdryer. That's exactly what it feels like.
It does nothing to stop the 55-degree pavement from radiating heat up at you, and it doesn't block a single photon of UV or infrared light from hitting your skin. Plus, it relies on a battery and a mechanical motor.
Right.
If it dies or breaks, you are left holding a useless piece of plastic.
Here is where the argument becomes undeniable to me. When you look at that entire list, sunscreen, hats, shirts, fans, the high-tech sun umbrella is the single solitary tool that offers an immediate, passive, fully adjustable system that tackles both UV radiation and thermal heat loads simultaneously.
It does both.
It doesn't trap your body heat like a tight shirt. It doesn't require batteries like a fan. It blocks the heat that sunscreen lets through, and it covers your whole upper body, unlike a baseball cap. It just silently, passively works.
It is the elegance of extreme simplicity combined with advanced materials. And if we go back to your video game analogy from earlier...
All the safe zones.
Yes. The umbrella fundamentally changes the rules of the game. You no longer have to frantically sprint between the shrinking shadows of street signs and trees. The umbrella allows you to take the safe zone with you.
Yes. The text uses a phrase I absolutely love. It creates a continuous shade flow.
Shade flow.
Yes.
It is a brilliant concept. Walking through a city without an umbrella means subjecting your body to massive, rapid thermal spikes.
Right.
You step out of the cool shade of a large oak tree directly into the glaring, unmitigated brutality of an open concrete plaza. Your skin temperature spikes, your heart rate increases to pump blood to the skin for cooling, your sweat glands go into overdrive.
And then you step into the shade of a building, and the process reverses.
It is a physiological roller coaster. Your autonomic nervous system is just constantly redlining, trying to keep up with the changing environment.
That makes so much sense. The umbrella acts as a thermal stabilizer. By maintaining a continuous, unbroken shade flow over your body, it smooths out those extreme environmental spikes.
Exactly.
Your body isn't constantly shocked by rapid temperature changes. This massively reduces the cumulative cardiovascular strain of the walk, which is, one of the primary drivers of heat exhaustion.
It preserves your energy.
Okay, so objectively, logically, and scientifically, the technology is vastly superior to anything else we have. It is lightweight, it blocks 98% of UV, it drops the perceived temperature by 10 degrees, it stabilizes your thermal load, doesn't trap sweat, and it never needs to be recharged.
It's the perfect tool.
So if it is this perfect, why aren't all men in Western cities currently walking around with sun umbrellas?
That is the big question.
Why isn't this as ubiquitous as wearing sunglasses? This brings us to what might be the most fascinating part of the essay, the cultural geography, and the complex history of sun shielding.
This is where we must transition away from thermodynamics and material science and dive deep into sociology, history, and the arbitrary rules of gendered fashion.
Right.
Because the barriers preventing mass adoption in the West have absolutely nothing to do with technology or utility. They are entirely psychological and cultural.
The essay does a great job pointing out that the cultural acceptance of carrying an umbrella for the sun is not a global constant. It varies wildly depending on where you are in the world and what era of history you are looking at.
It really does.
Let's start with the historical context, because it wasn't always this way in the West. In 18th and 19th century Europe, carrying a sunshade, a parasol, was incredibly common, but it was heavily loaded with class implications.
Yes. In the Victorian era and earlier, the parasol was the ultimate symbol of aristocracy, wealth, and leisure.
Because of the working class.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, the vast majority of the working class labored outdoors in agriculture. Therefore, having tan, sun-weathered skin was a visual indicator of manual labor and low social status.
So having pale, pristine skin was proof that you were wealthy enough to stay indoors, or that you had servants to do the outdoor work for you.
Exactly.
The parasol was a tool to preserve that visual proof of privilege.
Yes.
It communicated to society, I do not have to toil in the sun.
It was an object of extreme privilege, and while it eventually became highly gendered towards women as a delicate fashion accessory, its primary function was class demarcation.
But contrast that European history with the historical trajectory in East Asia.
That's where it gets interesting.
The text notes a profound difference there. In East Asian history, sun parasols were heavily utilized, but they were common across multiple strata of society.
Yes, not just the wealthy.
They were used in agricultural context by laborers to survive the brutal sun while working the fields, and they were also deeply embedded in imperial and aristocratic contexts, used by both men and women of the court.
Because it wasn't solely restricted to a single gendered or class-based aesthetic in East Asia, the continuous use of the tool was never fully interrupted. And that deep historical precedent has echoed loudly into the present day.
If you look at modern geography, and the author specifically points to nations like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, the use of specialized UV umbrellas is widely normalized.
Extremely normal.
And critically, it is normalized across all genders and all age groups. You will see young men in sharp business suits in Tokyo carrying them, elderly people carrying them, teenagers carrying them.
In those cultures, the sun umbrella has been stripped of its gendered baggage. It is viewed through a purely utilitarian lens.
Just a tool.
It is seen as a basic, everyday health and hygiene tool, no different than carrying a water bottle, putting on chapstick, or wearing sunglasses. It is just basic maintenance of the human body in a harsh environment.
But the European shift went in the exact opposite direction. As we moved into the 20th century, modern Western cities largely abandoned sun umbrellas, particularly for men.
They did.
The text says they can be viewed as fragile, overly theatrical, or anachronistic.
The West developed a very specific, rigid, and ultimately illogical view of what a man was supposed to carry in public.
Right.
Carrying a heavy black umbrella for the rain was deemed acceptable. It was the uniform of the London businessman in a bowler hat. It was stoic. It was protecting the suit.
But the sun umbrella was different.
Yes. Carrying a lighter, specialized umbrella for the sun was culturally coded as delicate, as a purely aesthetic, and therefore feminine, accessory. To carry one was to violate the unspoken dress code of Western masculinity.
But that stubbornness is finally starting to crack, isn't it?
It is, thankfully.
The author highlights that the sheer, unavoidable brutality of recent heat waves in southern and central Europe is forcing a rapid cultural reevaluation.
Because the heat is just too much.
Places like Spain, Italy, and even parts of Germany and the UK are experiencing temperatures they simply aren't built for. And suddenly, what used to be dismissed as eccentric tourist behavior or some highly niche fashion statement is rapidly accelerating into mainstream acceptance.
Extreme, sustained climate pressure is an incredibly effective solvent for dissolving arbitrary cultural rules.
That's a great way to put it.
When the urban pavement is radiating at 55 degrees Celsius and you feel physically ill just waiting for the tram, people's priorities shift very quickly.
They really do.
They stop caring if they look slightly theatrical to a passing stranger, and they start caring deeply about not passing out from heat stroke on their way to work. Raw physical necessity is overriding outdated fashion norms.
But despite that acceleration, the essay makes it clear that the biggest remaining hurdle in the West isn't the availability of the tech, and it's not even the weather itself. It is deeply, stubbornly ingrained in our psychology.
The psychology is the hardest part to change.
The author dives into this fascinating tension between traditional Western masculinity, the psychology of endurance, and what they term the visibility of protection.
This is perhaps the most profound sociological insight in the entire essay. It requires us to examine the way we signal our resilience to the public.
Okay.
The text points out that Western men's fashion and male behavioral norms in general have historically heavily favored invisible protection.
Invisible protection. Let's really unpack that. Applying sunscreen in your bathroom before you leave the house is invisible. Nobody on the street knows you are wearing it.
Right.
Wearing a high-tech UPF base layer beneath your shirt is invisible. Even wearing sunglasses, while visible, is culturally coded as cool, mysterious, or rugged.
They don't look like protection, they look like style.
In all these instances, you are protecting yourself, but you are doing it in a way that doesn't draw attention to your vulnerability. You can protect yourself as long as it looks effortless, as long as it looks like you aren't trying too hard.
Exactly. You maintain the illusion of rugged immunity to the elements. But opening a sun umbrella is the exact opposite of that.
It's a statement.
It is a physical, external, highly expressive, and incredibly visible act. You are holding a 1-meter canopy above your head. You are holding a beacon that broadcasts to everyone on the street, as the author brilliantly puts it. Conditions require adjustment.
You are publicly admitting that the environment is too harsh for you to handle unassisted.
Yes.
Picture yourself right now, listener. Imagine you were standing on a crowded downtown street corner, waiting for the light to change. It's noon. It's sweltering. You have a sleek, carbon fiber sun umbrella in your bag.
Would you use it?
Would you feel a spike of self-consciousness as you unzip your bag to take it out? Would you hesitate before pressing the button to open it? Why? What is the narrative running through your head about what the people around you are thinking? Are you worried they think you are weak? Dramatic.
That hesitation, that spike of anxiety, is deeply rooted in outdated, toxic associations between masculinity and the silent endurance of physical discomfort.
Right. There is a deeply illogical idea embedded in our culture that a tough person, a capable person, simply suffers through the heat without complaint. They just sweat it out.
They grin and bear it.
Right. But as the source reminds us, with cold, hard science, silently enduring heat stress is not a display of strength. It is a display of physiological ignorance.
Ouch.
Heat stress actively degrades your cognitive performance.
Yeah.
It impairs your decision-making. It drastically degrades your physical endurance and coordination. Your brain literally operates slower when your core temperature rises.
You literally get stupider, slower, and weaker when you are overheating. There is nothing tough about purposely lowering your cognitive ability just to avoid looking unusual to a stranger you will never see again.
Precisely. Therefore, choosing to silently endure that physical degradation when a perfect 300-gram solution is sitting right there in your backpack isn't tough. It is wildly counterproductive.
This is silly. Carrying your own shade and deploying it when the environment turns hostile is a sign of strategic intelligence.
Yes.
It is a sign of rapid adaptation. It is recognizing a threat and using a highly engineered tool to mitigate it. That is the absolute opposite of weakness. It is mastery over your environment.
And the good news is that we don't have to suffer this awkwardness forever. The essay talks about how societies move past these arbitrary hang-ups through a process called the normalization cycle.
The normalization cycle.
It describes a very predictable social feedback loop. The first time an observer on the street sees a man walking with a sun umbrella, their brain flags it as an anomaly. They view it as unusual, maybe a bit eccentric or foreign.
Sure.
But the second time they see it, the shock is gone. By the third or fourth time they see someone comfortably strolling in their own personal patch of shade while everyone else is sweating profusely, they start to view it as a practical, enviable adaptation.
They might even want one.
And finally, through sheer volume and repetition, the visual ceases to be an anomaly. It becomes entirely neutral. It simply blends into the background noise of the urban landscape. Cities have a remarkable ability to normalize new objects through mass exposure.
We have seen this exact cycle play out so many times in our own recent history.
We really have. The analogy that immediately jumped to my mind while reading this, and the author touches on similar behavioral shifts, is the cultural normalization of over-ear noise-canceling headphones.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Or large, reusable metal water bottles, or even adult professionals riding folding scooters in suits.
The headphone analogy is incredibly apt for this situation.
Think about it. 15 years ago, if you walked down a busy city street wearing massive, over-eared noise-canceling headphones,
Yeah,
you looked like an alien.
you really did.
It was seen as visually jarring. People thought it was deeply antisocial, like you were intentionally walling yourself off from society. Now, look around any subway car or downtown sidewalk. Half the population has giant headphones clamped to their ears. It is completely ubiquitous. Nobody blinks an eye.
Because the utility so vastly outweighed the initial social awkwardness. And the psychological parallel is perfect. Just as those noise-canceling headphones give you absolute granular control over your audio environment in a chaotic, deafening city.
The sun umbrella gives you absolute control over your thermal environment.
Exactly. You stop being a passive victim of the city's design. You shift your entire psychological experience from relying on environmental luck, just praying that the next block has some tall trees or an awning you can cower under, to having intentional personal agency over your own comfort.
And having psychological control actually reduces your perceived level of discomfort.
It does.
When you feel you have agency, when you know you can deploy a solution at any moment, the environment itself feels less oppressive and less threatening. You walk with more confidence.
You're not fighting the city anymore.
So, bringing all of this together, what does this actually mean for us? We've covered thermodynamics, advanced material science, the history of European aristocracy, and the psychology of toxic masculinity.
We covered a lot.
To summarize the core, beating heart of Luca Jaegor's essay, the men's handheld sun umbrella is the absolute perfect embodiment of what he calls quiet infrastructure.
Quiet infrastructure. It is quiet because it does not require a massive publicly funded rollout.
Right.
It doesn't require complex collective agreements, deeply fraught city council votes, or decades of systemic macro-level urban planning that gets bogged down in red tape.
It doesn't need to be plugged into a smart grid. It simply works. Right now, today, in the exact, imperfect, concrete-heavy conditions we currently live in.
And that immediacy is its ultimate value. As our climate continues to shift and as our concrete cities inevitably grow hotter over the coming decades, we are going to see a preview of a new, highly adaptive urban future.
A new kind of city life.
And that future won't necessarily look like some utopian sci-fi movie with giant air-conditioned geodesic domes covering the entire city. It is going to look much more pragmatic.
Yeah.
It will look like millions of individuals making highly rational, independent choices. It will be a landscape of people carrying their own meticulously engineered microsystems of comfort, deploying them to navigate an increasingly challenging and hostile physical world. The reemergence of the sun umbrella is not a fad, it is just the vanguard of that movement.
Which leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to mull over as you go about your day.
All right, let's hear it.
If our personal portable accessories, like a 300-gram carbon fiber titanium-coated umbrella, are increasingly having to step in to compensate for the fundamental failure of our cities to protect us from the climate, what is next?
That's a huge question.
What other mundane, everyday objects might we soon have to entirely over-engineer and redesign? What else are we going to have to carry with us in our backpacks just to achieve basic environmental survival on a quick 20-minute trip to the grocery store? Are we going to see personal, wearable air scrubbers for wildfire smoke? Portable cooling vests becoming standard business attire?
It is a profound question about the future of everyday carry, and it is one we are all going to have to answer much sooner than we think. The era of stepping outside with just your keys and your wallet might be coming to a close.
It's a fascinating and slightly terrifying thought. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. The next time you step out of a heavily air-conditioned building and see the heat shimmering in waves off the pavement, I hope you remember the thermodynamics of the city, and I hope you think about the quiet, portable power of carrying your own shade. Stay cool out there, don't let the concrete battery cook you, and as always, stay curious.